Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, the podcast. My name is Monty, and I'm the host and author. Today we begin a new fictional journey entitled Zodiac, Attempted Redemption. But before we begin, I want to thank my lovely wife Becky for all her help and support. Chapter 1, The Chronicle. The Chronicle was a relevant voice in the Bay Area, even in a digital world where everyone was screaming at once. There was something nostalgic, almost romantic, about a newspaper landing on your doorstep in the morning, folded crisp, smelling like ink and effort. Clara had earned her spot here. Not just because of her 28 years, but because she had done almost every job inside those walls, and a few outside. She was dependable, versatile, deeply woven into the fabric of the place. The kind of person who knew how to fix the printer, settle an argument, and calm a rookie reporter all before lunch. But it hadn't started that way. She'd been young, idealistic, and maybe a little naive when she walked through the front doors holding her freshly printed resume and asked to speak to someone about any openings. The receptionist gave her usual line, "Thank you, we'll pass it along." But Clara didn't leave. She kept talking about her punctuality, her love for learning, and most of all, her passion for the written word. Nancy McSimmons, secretary to the sports editor, happened to be walking by on her way to lunch when she overheard that line, love for the written word. She stopped, introduced herself, walked her straight into her boss's office, and made the introductions. Then, Nancy went to lunch like nothing happened. Nancy would go on telling that story for the next 8 years, right up until the day she retired. Now, Clara did a little bit of everything. Her title no longer mattered. She had the corner office, the respect of her peers, and the quiet knowledge that her time was winding down. There were younger journalists waiting in the wings, their eyes full of fire. She remembered that feeling well. She would make space for them soon. Clara had plans. A podcast, maybe. A novel, something meaningful. Perhaps travel. Rescue a special needs dog or cat from the SPCA. The list was long, and getting longer. She was still young, but it was time. Her heart had been telling herself for a while. That morning, she was listening to a podcast called Great Women Artists. It wasn't life-changing, but it was pleasant. Her daily routine had become sacred. Arrive early, start the coffee, leave the overhead lights off, and sit in her office with only the soft glow of her laptop while the sun climbed over the skyline. Some days she listened to music, other days a podcast. It depended on her mood. The first hour of her day belonged to her. Then the building would lurch from silence to chaos, and her time would be gone. She was half listening to the podcaster's voice when she noticed the envelope on the corner of her desk. Had it been there last night? She didn't remember seeing it. The handwriting was messy, below average, even, but her name and the Chronicle's address were spelled correctly. A faded stamp marked it from Vallejo, California. She smiled faintly. It wasn't unusual. Over the years, she'd made countless friends and contacts in and out of the business. People sent her postcards, articles, little mementos. It was no secret Clara loved butterflies. Everyone knew it. So, people sent her everything. Facts, event dates, stickers, once even a fossil. She picked up her butterfly-handled letter opener, carefully sliced the top of the envelope, and slid out the folded papers. There were 2 of them. Plain white, standard print, nothing special. She unfolded the first one. I read the line that would change everything. This is the Zodiac speaking. Chapter 2. Michael, 78 days earlier. Michael was counting his blessings. It wasn't something he did often, at least not out loud. But today felt like one of those days. Sunshine, the hum of spring just around the corner, and Nikki leaning against the bumper of the Monte Carlo like a scene from an old movie. They'd grown up in the same small town, known each other since third grade, had crushes on other people, drifted apart, came back together. It wasn't dramatic, it was just life, unfolding the way it does when you stick around long enough. And somehow, in all the ways that mattered, they'd found their way back to each other. She was studying to be a dental assistant, a goal she'd talked about since high school and never once wavered. Michael had taken a different path, still working through business courses, figuring things out one semester at a time. Today, they were going to visit his grandmother. She'd been at the Carlisle for a few months now, and his parents had been nudging him to go. Nikki had promised they would, so today they would. Michael loved his grandmother, he really did, but he'd loved his grandfather more. They'd fished together, hunted, rebuilt the Monte Carlo from nothing. When Michael drove it, it felt like a small piece of that time was still alive. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, he could almost hear his grandfather's voice again. Just a word or two, just enough to confuse the silence. Nikki knew today would be hard, so she had stopped at his favorite sub shop, ordered a steak and cheese, cut in half. One sandwich, one soda, root beer, of course. Nikki worked part-time at the pet store. Her name tag still said trainee, even after 2 years, but everyone knew she could run the place if they needed her to. Officially, she worked the fish tanks. Unofficially, she did whatever needed to be done. Splurging on the sandwich and soda meant something, and Michael knew it. He didn't say much, but the gesture stayed with him. His parents liked to remind him he didn't deserve her. Last night had been one of those moments, another guilt trip, dressed up as concern. That's when Nikki said, "We'll go see his grandmother tomorrow." Just like that. End of argument. He didn't care. He loved her. She loved him. The rest would work itself out. Right? Just before they left town, Nikki reminded him about Sunday. "Don't forget, we're going into the early service," she said as she grabbed his keys. "You promised." "I didn't forget," Michael replied, half smiling. They'd been attending a small, non-denominational church together for a few months now, her idea. A quiet place on the edge of town, where the pastor wore jeans and the music leaned acoustic. Nothing flashy, but it felt right to Nikki. Michael didn't talk much about what he believed, not even to Nikki. But the calm of it all, the order, the prayers, the hymns, it settled something in him. Sunday was still a few days away, but today he had her, the car, and half a sandwich, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 3. The Ultimatum. The visit with Grandma Windsor went as well as it could have. As they walked up the long front path towards the Carlisle, a modest senior living facility just outside of town, Michael couldn't help noticing the cluster of residents gathered outside. One woman feeding birds from a little paper cup. Another sat in a wheelchair reading a magazine, sunglasses perched crooked on her nose. 2 older men, in matching windbreakers, played checkers on a table between them. God, no thank you, Michael thought. Beside him, Nikki smiled as they passed a pair, laughing, sitting on a bench, cardigans draped over their shoulders. I hope we can be a cute old couple one day. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, releasing a wave of faint floral cleaner and freshly polished floors. A soap opera played low on a wall-mounted TV behind the front desk. Someone was vacuuming. The place wasn't fancy, but it was warm, clean, cared for. Grandma Windsor sat in a small chair beside the window in her room, wrapped in a navy shawl. Her white curls were flattened on one side from a nap, and the pink polish on her nails was chipped at the edges. She was thinner than Michael remembered, but her eyes, still a sharp hazel color, lit up when she saw him. "Oh, sweetie," she said, reaching for his hand. "You've grown even taller, I swear it." Michael smiled. "You say that every time." She laughed, but it caught part way and turned into a cough. Nikki gently stepped in and offered her a sip of water. The dementia had started settling into the middle stages. Flickers of memory, sudden confusion, moments of startling clarity. Michael did the best he could, smiled, nodded, answered the same questions again and again. He was patient, loving even, but Nikki noticed the tension creeping through him. Later in the car, she asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window. Finally, it's like she remembers enough to know what she's forgetting. That evening, his parents wanted a full report. The conversation started fine. Then it veered off. College, grades, his future, until it landed exactly where he knew it would. How's the house coming along? They knew he had been avoiding the drive past his grandparents' old place. They also knew how hard it was for him to say goodbye to the man who'd probably been his best friend, tied with Nikki at this point. Still, they reminded him it was his responsibility now. That meant clearing every room, prepping for a garage sale, tossing out what couldn't be sold, and sending over a list of needed repairs before they could list the property. They said they'd given him plenty of time. Now, the date was set. 2 weeks from today. The estate sale had already been advertised. Their schedules wouldn't allow time for them to help. It was up to him. Michael could have kept his mouth shut. Should have, probably. Instead, "Oh, but you'll still find time for weekly TV shows, right? Italian night out? Friday curry? Sunday movie date?" Nikki sat in silence as the next act of the family drama unfolded around her. There was no saving this evening. By the time it ended, she was helping Michael pack a duffel and a backpack, just enough for a couple of weeks. Together, they made the short drive to his grandparents' house. They parked in the driveway, walked around back, and stepped into the screened-in porch, what Grandma always liked to call the shoe room. It still didn't have a lock on it. Michael's hands trembled as he slid the key into the door. It wasn't just nerves. The fight with his parents still sat heavy on his chest. In every way that mattered, they'd pushed him out of what he once thought of as his house. But something else was simmering too, something darker, a whisper just below the surface. A sharp voice that said, "You don't belong anywhere." Then the door opened, and the scent of his grandparents wrapped around him like a blanket. For a moment, it was exactly what he needed. The house was quiet, a little after 9 p.m. Nikki suggested they do a walkthrough, then decide which room to tackle first. The place wasn't big, but his grandparents had lived full lives and collected plenty of things along the way. Big things, small things, sentimental things. The house was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a cozy den, and the kitchen, by far the most overwhelming. Drawers packed with gadgets whose purpose had long been forgotten, cabinets full of mismatched dishes, antique glasses, and knickknacks for days. And then the narrow door leading to the basement. Michael took Nikki's hand and led her down the steps. It was just a basement, but a surprisingly organized one. Nikki raised her eyebrows, not because it was clean. His grandparents had always been tidy, but because it felt deliberate. A place for everything, and everything in its place. Labeled boxes lined the walls. Michael Sr.'s military stuff. Michael Sr.'s books. Wedding. Along the back wall, Grandma Abby's old salon supplies were stacked neatly in a corner. Curlers, clippers, old paperwork, all untouched. Michael found a stack of vintage hunting and fishing magazines and wondered briefly if any of them might be worth something. He kept flipping through them, even after Nikki had called his name once, then twice. He wasn't being rude. He just couldn't stop reading. The articles were full of violent, language, dressed up to beat tradition, clean kill, one-shot drop, how to gut in under 60 seconds. He closed the last one just a little too slow. Meanwhile, Nikki explored a nook behind the stairs, the home decor zone, organized by season. She flipped a separate switch. A soft overhead light came on. For a while, they stayed in their own little worlds, Michael flipping through boxes, estimating what might sell online before the yard sale. Nikki admiring decorations, quietly setting aside a few that might make good keepsakes. Eventually, they agreed it was too late to start sorting properly. They'd begin fresh in the morning. As Nikki reached to turn off the light, something caught her eye. Behind the wooden post that held the switch, half wedged between the stud and the wall, was a box. Not a fancy box, not labeled, not meant to be seen. She hesitated. Pest trap? Maybe, but the shape wasn't right. Michael tried to reach, but his hand was too big to fit in the space. So, he stood back and watched as Nikki crouched down and slowly eased the box out, inch by inch, until she could tilt it sideways and slide it free. It was a small shoebox, old, dusty. On the top, written in black marker, Christmas ornaments. The box must have been encased by enough packing tape to fill 2 dispensers. Nikki couldn't hide her disappointment. Michael laughed, gave her a gentle pinch. Sorry if you thought our family fortune was buried behind the light switch in the basement. Chapter 4. She Dreamed Real. The Glass family had been part of the community for generations, long before Nikki was born. They had owned the downtown pharmacy for decades, until her grandfather passed and the family sold the business. It still carried the family name. Whenever Nikki drove past the building, she pictured herself sitting on her grandfather's lap, giggling as he handed her quarters for the old machine that dispensed rubber balls in all different sizes and colors. It made her sad, but Nikki had grown up with sadness and disappointment. Losing her grandfather had only been the beginning. Less than a year later, her grandmother passed too, leaving Nikki and her mom a family of 2. She never knew her dad. When he found out he was going to be a dad, he enlisted in the military and never came back to town. They'd occasionally see his parents around. Nobody said anything, but it was a small town. Everyone knew. They just pretended not to. Nikki's mother was a proud woman. Nikki had watched her work 2 jobs and still hustle side gigs in the early years just to keep the lights on. Eventually, her mom found her stride in real estate. These days, if she wasn't the top salesperson in the county, she was second. Nikki had seen the hard times. Now she wanted the good ones. The easy road for her to take would have been real estate. She'd considered it. Her mom had pushed it. Nikki had the personality, the smarts, the connections. She would have done well, but it wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to be a dental assistant. It was something she had wanted since her freshman year of high school. That's how she wanted to spend her days after graduation. And when Nikki Glass made up her mind, she rarely changed it. Michael was a lot of work, but she loved him, and work didn't scare her, never had. So she put in the work. And for the most part, it was paying off. They were a happy couple. He was taking some classes. They were making plans, ones that involved living somewhere above ground, preferably not in one of their parents' houses. An affordable wedding in a halfway clean barn with white chairs and round tables, a DJ, some decent food, a couple days at the beach for their honeymoon, a small house with a fenced yard, a kid or 2, maybe a dog. That was her dream. Nikki didn't dream MTV big. She dreamed real, and she wasn't afraid to work for it. They'd even started going to church together, a small place on the edge of town with warm pews, warm faces, and music that felt like home. They were going on her suggestion, but she hoped it would stick. Sunday mornings gave her a kind of peace that nothing else could. And on the weeks that they didn't go, that they didn't hold hands, hum along to the hymns, it felt like they were missing something. Because when they did go, it felt like they were building something bigger than just a plan. They were building a foundation. Sometimes she caught herself hoping he'd see the older couples 2 rows up, the husband still holding his wife's hand when they prayed, the couple who shared smiles during the final song, and imagined that kind of future for her. Sometimes she even thought Michael did. Other times, he'd sit stiff beside her, quiet, still. She could feel he was tense, like the whole place was pressing down on him. He never said anything afterward, never complained, but she noticed, and she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it than just the sermons. Michael came from what we most consider a good home, a safe one, but love had looked different in their house. Nikki had learned to hustle for security. Michael had been told it would eventually just come. She didn't doubt herself. She just worried that his uncertainty might one day collapse what they were trying to build together. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Zodiac Attempted Redemption, where we meet Michael and Nikki and begin to follow along in their life journey, a journey that is about to take a deadly turn.